Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am going to have to ask you for a bit of a technical support and tell me whether my microphone is working because I've been getting some audio problems. I don't really understand what I'm doing with this. But I'm seeing peaky things on my microphone on OBS and it tells me I'm streaming. So I'm kind of hoping that once you guys catch up with me in the chat, because I've got a 30-second delay on here, that you will tell me whether or not my audio is working. While we're talking about the chat, let's say hello to Scott. Thank you, Chris C. Thank you, Paul Ewan. And thank you, Sfax, Diz, and Daylight Dave for telling me that the sound's working. That's always good, isn't it? It's Monday morning, and welcome to all of you to what used to be formerly known, the artist formerly known as Graham Hughes' Morning Brew, and it's something that I've recently taken over, and I'm very grateful for all of you for still attending today. Pygmalion, thank you very much for the £20 super chat. Pygmalion says, it was my birthday yesterday. It's hard being older than Doctor Who. Well, you know, arguably Doctor Who, I think, is thousands of years old, Pygmalion, so you've got a way to go. But thank you very much for the generous gift of £20. Your support is indeed very, very welcome to the channel. If any of you feel generous, if it's close to payday and you've got a few spare pennies to help save the channel, if you can't help save the planet, then that would be very much appreciated, I'm sure. But Pygmalion, thank you very much. There's also Graham in the chat, Graham Hughes, don't know who he is. Seem to remember he ran this channel before the terrible revelations that came out alongside the Greg Wallace story. I think many of those revelations were not covered in the press because the Greg Wallace story obviously a bit bigger, but Graham obviously has an awful lot to answer for. Do your own research to find out what I'm talking about there. Anyway, Graham is still away till Wednesday, I think, or maybe Thursday even, but still insists on logging in to check that we're doing okay. So today I thought I was watching some of the coverage yesterday and of Donald Trump arriving in Scotland. I think he arrived on Saturday or something and played golf with 27 buggies, and yesterday met with the European or the EU president, Ursula von der Leyen, and did an interesting press conference. And what I thought I'd do is attempt, because, you know, technically, why not challenge yourself on a Monday morning to try and cover, you know, an entire story that that involves playing video clips. And what we'll do is just technically, we'll set it up so that we can play some video clips. Now, I don't know if you can see that. I hope that you're going to be able to hear it. But this is a clip from Donald Trump's press conference yesterday. And it's him responding to Ursula talking about immigration in the EU. And I think, for me, it just set a context on a concept I've been trying to work out for a while. And now I'm going to ask you to excuse me when I get facts wrong. Please feel free to correct me in the chat if I get any of the facts wrong. I will be relying on some research that I did this morning on ChatGPT, and we all know that that may well be wrong. But this clip, I think, kind of sums up Donald Trump's attitude. So let's just play this clip and we'll talk about it in a minute.
On the topic of irregular migration. And we have, from the very beginning, said that migration is a European challenge that needs a European answer. As Europeans, we will fulfill our international obligations, as we've done in the past, also in the future. But we, as Europeans, are the ones who decide who comes to the European Union and under what circumstances, and not the smugglers and traffickers. That's the principle in which we are working.
Right. I will say this, they did ask me when I got off the plane, immigration, Europe has a tremendous problem, and we do too, but we've sealed our borders. We have nobody coming in, and we have hundreds of thousands of people being taken out, and the bad ones first, and I think we're doing a very good job of that. But it literally registered 0 people last month. You probably saw that, nobody. And Europe has a very similar problem. I think they're going to end up in the same place. You might as well go there quicker. And the other thing I say to Europe, we will not allow a windmill to be built in the United States. They're killing us. They're killing the beauty of our scenery, our valleys, our beautiful plains. And I'm not talking about airplanes. I'm talking about beautiful plains, beautiful areas in the United States. And you look up, and you see windmills all over the place. It's a horrible thing. It's the most expensive form of energy. It's no good. They're made in China, almost all of them. When they start to rust and rot in 8 years, you can't really turn them off. You can't bury them. They won't let you bury the propellers, the props, because there's a certain type of fiber that doesn't go well with the land. That's what they say. The environmentalists say you can't bury them because the fiber doesn't go well with the land. In other words, if you bury it, it will harm our soil. The whole thing is a con job. It's very expensive. And in all fairness, Germany tried it, and wind doesn't work. You need subsidy for wind, and energy should not need subsidy. With energy, you make money. You don't lose money. But more important than that is it ruins the landscape. It kills the birds. They're noisy. You have a certain place in the Massachusetts area that over the last 20 years had 1 or 2 whales wash ashore, and over the last short period of time, they had 18, okay? Because it's driving them loco. It's driving them crazy. Now, windmills will not come. It's not going to happen in the United States, and it's very expensive, and I would love to see. Today I'm playing the best course, I think, in the world, Turnberry. Even though I own it, it's probably the best course in the world, right? And I look over the horizon and I see 9 windmills. It's like right at the end of the 18th. I said, isn't that a shame? What a shame. You have the same thing all over Europe in particular. You have windmills all over the place. Some of the countries prohibit it, but people ought to know that these windmills are very destructive. They're environmentally unsound, just the exact opposite. Because the environmentalists, they're not really environmentalists. They're political hacks. These are people that they almost want to harm the country. But you look at these beautiful landscapes all over the world. Many countries have gotten smart. They will not allow it. They will not. It's the worst form of energy, the most expensive form of energy. But windmills should not be allowed. Okay.
So, some of the comments in the chat are exactly what I thought about this. The question he was asked, or that Ursula answered first, was about immigration in the EU. And Trump pivoted pretty quickly, on one of his favourite subjects, immigration, pivoted to windmills for almost no perceptible reason. But I'm kind of arguing that there is a perceptible reason. There's a good reason why Trump and other right-wing politicians look at climate change as a political issue rather than a scientific issue and an existential crisis for humanity. And I've kind of got a theory about this. What I want to do just before I do that is just break down a couple of the things that Trump went on to say there. The idea that he doesn't listen to environmentalists when they talk about climate change, but he does listen to environmentalists when they talk about burying the windmill blades after 8 years. He's wrong about everything there, just wrong about everything. Windmills are manufactured in such a way that they can be recycled, that they can be refurbished and reused. They are made of materials that can be very easily reused. Aluminium steel and carbon fibre to some extent. But he's completely wrong about that. But he's listening to some environmentalists in some respect. The other idea is that the windmills are driving the whales mad. This is ludicrous and unscientific and unproven. But the big question really is, why does he pivot? Why does, in Trump's tiny, tiny little brain, does he link climate change, windmills, and immigration? And I think there's something actually a bit darker and deeper in this. But before I go on to expand on that, let me just have a look at another clip that I've got of the terrible and rather ugly Mr. Farage talking about climate change. Look, don't expect there to be no technical issues here. There are technical issues.
You mentioned Dame Andrea Jenkins, who's now one of your elected mayors. She said this week she doesn't believe that climate change exists. Do you believe in man-made climate change?
Well, you just said they're two separate questions.
Or do you believe in man-made climate change?
Well, do I believe in climate change? Yes. Does man have an influence? Impossible to think we haven't got some influence. As to what proportion it is, I've no idea.
But as a simple question,
no, I know.
Do you believe in
This is
man-made
not my
climate
religion.
change?
This is not my religion. I know it's a religion in Westminster now in a fairly godless age. It's not my religion. The real point about it is, are we going to deindustrialise Britain? There are 2.5 million manufacturing jobs left in Britain that are under threat and could be gone within the next decade unless we change direction, and that particularly relates to energy policy.
And indeed there are billions of pounds worth of public policy decisions that depend on whether or not people believe the science and they believe in the kind of steps that people should be taken. But the science suggests very strongly, thousands of scientists would say this, the consensus is absolutely clear that man's activity has a significant impact on the climate.
Well, say it does.
And you have a senior figure in your party that doesn't believe in it.
Well, is that sufficient reason to defraud British taxpayers of billions of pounds every year, which is what we're doing in subsidising wind energy and solar energy for literally zero effect?
So look, I apologise. Many of you in the chat are saying, what on earth have you done to be subjected to both Donald Trump and Farage at this time in the morning? I apologise. It's either them or me. So I'm going to take this as a vote of confidence in the fact you'd rather see me than either of those two, but that's a pretty low bar, isn't it? Farage there taking a different stance on Kunzberg's show, slightly different stance, where he kind of acknowledges that man may have a role in climate change, but also says, so what? And also, I don't know. Which I think he replied 17 times to Laura Kunzberg in terms of anything other than immigration. But obviously, the bulk of that interview was about immigration, was about Farage's views on immigration. And that led on to a conversation about climate change, where he acknowledged that there may be some influence of men, but it didn't matter. I think there's a reason why Farage doesn't entirely parrot Trump on this subject, on climate change. His argument is more of an economic argument. It's more of a why are we wasting money on net zero when we could be spending more money on oil? Very similar to Trump's position, which is that oil makes money and renewables don't. But I think Farage isn't as fucking dumb as Donald Trump, isn't as stupid as Donald Trump, and knows for a fact that industrialization has affected climate change over the last 200 years. And can't deny that. But one of the things that, he just writes it off as being unimportant. And that's kind of his shtick on this at the moment. I think what Trump represents there is a basic view, the kind of flat earth view, which is that you look out your window, you see a windmill, and you think it's ugly, and therefore it must be pretty crap. for the environment, because the environment, as far as Trump is concerned, is his beautiful golf courses, is the lovely scenery that's around us. It's not actually the machine that sustains humanity and other animals. And plants. There are a couple of super chats. Let me just go back to those. Tim Ballum, thank you for the £2. I don't know if Trump was cheating at golf. I think he always cheats at golf, doesn't he? It seems to be his modus operandi. He cheats at everything, so why not golf? And Francis Winrow, thank you for the £5 super chat. Farage is a complete Knobhead. Yes, he is. I don't know if that's an acronym. But it seems to spell out the word knobhead. That's funny. Yeah, Farage is definitely a knobhead. So, look, why has climate change become a political issue where you can guarantee that people that are against immigration, people that are nationalists, are also opposed to the idea of man-made climate change, but also then almost deny the idea that climate change is happening, which is kind of impossible. The statistics prove that climate change is definitely happening. And in Farage's case, why does he get away with acknowledging that climate change is happening, but not caring whether humans are involved in that or not, and also not coming up with solutions for what we do about climate change? It's always baffled me as to why anybody would say, if you take the opposing argument that climate change is a natural process that's happened over millions of years and we should stop whinging about it, you have to look at the very thin line that exists in terms of how humans exist on this planet. We need a fairly constant temperature. We need fairly constant weather. We need predictable weather for our agriculture. And we need to have habitable temperatures to live in. And increasingly, that is changing. We also need land. And as sea levels rise, we're losing an awful lot of land. These things are facts, but many people on the right-hand side of politics claim that this is a natural process, as if we're going to adapt and survive. But they're not making any plans to adapt and survive. They don't seem to be putting any infrastructure in that would protect the cities. That most of our cities most of our major cities are on the coast for good reasons, because we use ports and docks, and traditionally that's why cities grew. Those cities are all under threat through climate change, but they're not making any provision. There's no investment in that. And my argument really is that these guys don't really give a shit. They don't give a shit about climate change. They don't understand the science of climate change, and they don't care about climate change. They're going to be okay. They can afford to buy properties in the mountains in New Zealand and survive the apocalypse that climate change might bring us, so they don't care personally. But they see it as a political issue because people look out the window and say it's a lovely sunny day. Why would I care about climate change? There's more rains and snow and more extremes of weather, but they just claim that this is natural and this is God's work in some way. Paula Thomas, thank you for the £5 super chat. There is video evidence of Trump cheating at golf over the weekend. I think maybe I should have chosen the golf cheating as the subject for today's video. This seems to be a big issue for everybody. My favourite picture of Trump playing golf is the one where he seems to have soiled his trousers. And speaking of somebody that has experienced arse problems for the last 7 months, I'm not knocking the fact that an 80-year-old man poos himself, but he shouldn't wear cream-coloured trousers, should he, if he's going to do that? Buy some brown slacks, Trump. Buy some brown slacks. Okay, so let's look at my basic thesis. I think the reason the right wing pick up on climate change as an issue is twofold. I think they're encouraged to do so by oil money. For the last 100 years, let's say, certainly 80 years, the oil and petroleum business is what's driven global politics and the global economy. You've only got to look at the fact that oil prices change every time there's a war in the Middle East or Russia does something, and you see the impact that oil has on our economy. So why are the oil companies interested in climate change? Well, obviously, for the last 50 years, they've been very aware that they are causing climate change. There are many papers, Shell knows, Exxon knows, that scientific papers commissioned by oil companies that absolutely prove that they know, they have always known that they are causing a problem. But their profits are at risk if they try and solve that problem. And the oil industry and the plastics industry is entirely about profits. We all know that. And it's about geopolitical power because despite what Trump says, and despite what Farage says, the oil industry is subsidized to the tune of something like $7 trillion a year and rising. Governments, including our government, subsidize the oil companies. And one of the reasons for that is it generates jobs in, the petrochemical industry, the drilling industry, right down to the plastics industry, right down to the, how do we get these pens made? They're made of oil. And no government really wants to do anything about stopping all of those jobs in any particular way, even though they know very clearly from the science that in a 10 to 20 year cycle here, 10 to 20 year period, we are fucked in terms of our reliance on oil, the carbon emissions that we're putting into the environment. It's going to become increasingly difficult for humans to exist on this planet. And over that period, there's a key fact that I think is connected. Now, you can call me a conspiracy theorist, but why target right-wing politicians if you're the oil companies and you want to distract from the idea that your profitable business is destroying the planet and making it uninhabitable? Well, I think one of the major impacts of climate change is going to be migration. If you think about it, the equator of our planet is going to be the thing that suffers the most from rising temperatures. It's already in most land masses the desert area of the world, and certainly to the north and south of the equator, we find the extremes of weather and uninhabitable land, and climate change is cited by the United Nations, by various organizations, as being a key factor, a major factor in current migration and future migration. And what's going to happen? You look at a map of the world, and look, we've got a globe here. Hey, I've got props. I've got video. I've got clips of Farage, and I've got props. Thank you very much to my housemate, for buying this as a leaving gift, by the way. It's an absolutely beautiful globe. And one of the things that you can tell when you look at a globe is that most of the land, let's just swing it round to where the land is, most of the land on our planet, the habitable land space, is in the northern hemisphere. If you look at the southern hemisphere, it's mainly water, some ice, and somewhere called Australia. But even the majority of Africa is above the equator, and most of the landmass in the world is in the northern areas. So one of the things that the oil companies and the politicians know full well is that migration is naturally going to have to happen. Humans are going to not be able to exist in those incredibly hot temperatures and increasingly weather-struck and disaster-struck areas. And they're going to have to move north. They're going to move into North America, and they're going to move into Northern Europe and China and Russia. And in America's case, they're an oil-producing country. In Northern Europe's case, and Russia in particular, they are also an oil-producing country. So there's a real tension between the fact that these countries are making money out of oil and they're also causing the migration problem. But the oil companies don't want to face up to that. If you think about what is bound to happen, is that migration is going to happen on a mass scale. The UN, I think, are predicting something in the region of 250 million people in the next 4 or 5 years, and upwards of 1.2 billion people having to be displaced just by climate change, not by the wars that oil is causing, although, disproportionately, most of the wars are about oil or areas where oil can be found. And essentially, humanity, if it's going to survive, is going to have to embrace migration or deal with migration in one way or another, and also invest hugely in renewable energy. So let's look at a couple of those issues. The first one, renewable energy. You could argue, why not just give contracts to the oil companies to do renewable energy and subsidize them? I think there's a really good case for that, actually. It's a pragmatic solution. many of you might argue, I might argue, that the oil companies should just be shut down, nationalised and dealt with. But that isn't really going to happen, is it? So why not subsidise oil companies to switch to producing renewable energy? Well, one of the problems that the oil companies face there is a geopolitical issue, and particularly the geo bit of this, in that there are oil reserves in certain places in the world, and they are the oil companies are licensed by government to exploit those oil resources, and subsidised to exploit those resources. But there is a finite amount of these in terms of the economic viability of drilling for oil, and that's kind of suits both parties. It suits the countries that have access to those oil reserves because they can issue licenses and bring jobs into their countries, and it suits the oil companies to have resources that are restricted to them, that they have a monopoly through those licenses of exploiting. And it suits countries like Saudi Arabia, like Russia in particular, like Iran even, and America. It suits them to have those geographic resources within their borders. It restricts the market, it monopolizes the oil companies, and it allows them to exploit their relationship with government in terms of subsidy. Paula Thomas, talking of subsidy, thank you very much for the £10 super chat. Technical point, what matters is a combination of temperature and humidity. Humans cannot survive if the wet bulb temperature is above 34 degrees C, at which point we can't cool down through sweat. I know a number of people in the last few days that have been complaining about that. Thank you very much, Paula Thomas, for the £10 super chat. And it's a very good point. I'm simplifying this issue to do with climate warming, but the implications of that are that it makes certain areas of the world much wetter and more humid. It causes more monsoons in different areas, and it causes extreme overheating. The greenhouse effect contributes to that in a big way. I haven't got the time or the inclination to do enough of the research. I appreciate, Paula, you doing some of it for me there. But in a way, I think we can look at this simplistically because Donald Trump is simple, and so is Nigel Farage. So the oil company, we kind of established here that the oil companies, although they're doing a bit about renewables, they're not doing enough about renewables. They're not swapping completely to renewables. And one of the reasons is that renewables democratize energy. Why? Well, because if it's sunny, you've got the ability to build solar farms, which means that the whole of Central Africa becomes one of the, and Australia, become some of the largest providers of energy, where they don't have oil reserves at the moment. That changes the power dynamic in the world. Now, many countries don't want that to happen. Saudi Arabia don't want Africa to suddenly become the biggest provider of energy in the world. And America certainly don't want Mexico to become the largest provider of energy in the world. Then you take wave energy, then you take water power, then you take wind power. Most countries in the world have some wind, some water, and some sea. And therefore, you're democratizing the production of renewables. Now, it's an expensive process to invest in the infrastructure, but countries can do that, and countries are doing that. And to an extent, many European countries are doing that, including us with Ed Miliband's latest GB Energy project. Cara Cosmic, thank you very much for the £5. Very much appreciated. You guys help me get through all this craziness, talking it out every morning. Thanks. Well, that's very much appreciated. I don't know whether I'm as good as Graham at that, but I appreciate the fact that you see us as a collective. And yeah, and everybody in the chat as well. I know that we look at a number of issues that are a nightmare. We're going to look at some good news in the paper review in a bit. But yeah, the existential crisis and geopolitical crisis of climate change, and watching Donald Trump and Nigel Farage this morning, I'm sure that's cheering everyone up. All right, so let me get to the bottom of this argument of mine. The oil companies, it's in their interests to keep this monopolistic relationship with governments. It's in many governments, many powerful governments' interests, certainly the larger economies of the world, to maintain that monopolistic relationship as well. And the oil companies, however, can't go out there with a PR campaign, and even Donald Trump would struggle to get away with this line, which is, we need to protect the billionaire oil barons. because nobody thinks that's a good idea. Nobody thinks that's a sellable idea. So the oil companies over the last 50 years have spent a lot of time trying to scientifically debunk climate change. They kind of failed at that. And then what they recognized was, well, hang on, what if we align ourselves with the politics of some of these Republican and conservative and refuck type politicians? What if we give them reasons to support our idea? One of the reasons, money. Trump is famously funded by the oil industry, and a lot of Farage's dirty money is dirty oil money. And similarly for right-wing politicians around the world. Putin is entirely funded by his oil and gas revenues, personally and as a country, and he uses that to influence this argument himself. But the oil companies are doing the same job. So what they do is they look at the Venn diagram and say, well, we know climate change, amongst other things, is going to cause an immigration problem. So if I go to right-wing politicians and say, yeah, I'll give you a load of money to talk about immigration, and the right-wing politicians sit there and say, that's great, you can fund me causing riots in Epping, in Farage's case, then... or backing up the idea that there shouldn't be windmills at Turnberry, which is what Trump is saying, or giving arguments that our manufacturing industry will be destroyed, as Farage was saying. Then the oil companies are funding the politicians' own rhetoric. Again, they don't really care about climate change. They're having to talk about it because they get some money and people ask them questions, but they don't really care. The issue they really care about is immigration. And one of the reasons they care about that immigration is, again, they don't want to be investing in accommodating millions and billions potentially of humans moving from one place to another, in particular into their countries. So what they've decided is that their strategy is to say, let's other the immigrants, let's spend 10, 20, however many years it takes for us to make it immigration a core political issue. Let's blame them for everything that's going wrong with our society. Let's blame them for all the crimes that are in our society. Let's blame them for our economic woes, even though to a large extent they contribute financially to every country that they migrate to. And, you know, America's a migrant country, and so is the UK. And, you know, that historic argument is completely wasted. But by othering the migrants, economic or refugee, they're able to create a easy narrative over a period of 50 years where it's possible to say, when it happens, when climate change causes these mass migration problems, which are happening slowly now, but will happen at speed if the curve of global warming keeps going the way it's going and we don't do anything about it. Instead of saying, let's build new infrastructure to accommodate these new humans that will be living in our territories, let's build renewable energy and invest in renewable energy resources so we don't exacerbate the problem. Let's invest in moving our cities so that when climate change happens, because it's happening, when sea levels rise, because that's happening, we can accommodate that by moving cities into places that can accommodate more people, that are completely net zero and sustainable. Let's do all of that. Well, that's going to cost billions and billions and trillions of dollars. There will be jobs as a result of all of that, but it's a long-term issue. It's more than a 5-year political cycle. So the only country really doing anything about this is China, who are at work on much longer political cycles than the West or America, and also don't really have any oil reserves of their own. They're a net purchaser of oil, so they want to get their independence through renewables, which is what all countries should be trying to do. And by funding people like Trump and Farage, the oil companies get to have their current status quo of massive profits, subsidized profits, and a monopoly. They get to keep all of that, because Farage or Truss or Trump are not going to take those licenses away anytime soon. Increasingly, I don't think the Labour Party are as well. But they get to keep that status quo, keep their profitability going in their lifetimes, not worry about the future, because they see that as not their issue. It's a political issue. It's not something they've caused. It's something the planet has caused. And the politicians will have to deal with this at a later date. Now, when that catches up with these politicians, let's face it, Trump will be long dead at that point. But when it catches up with these politicians, what are they going to do? They have two choices. They either allow that migration to happen, embrace it, get those people building renewables, get those people building solar farms and wind farms, or they put up borders, build a wall, which is a lot cheaper, and don't allow any of those people in. And then that becomes an existential crisis for humanity, not for the oil companies. Now, I don't know if I've done a good job explaining my thesis. I'm going to expand on this further. I'm actually working on a book, a cartoon book about the environment. And my thinking on this has started to make me wonder whether that's a children's story about oil barons. And it's going to be an interesting way to approach it. But what do you think? I mean, looking at the chat, a number of you agreeing with me, a number of you giving me some salient facts, which is increasingly useful. Nick says, Trump, stop illegal windmills arriving on small boats, blah, 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 blah. Pete's Music, you're spot on, doing a great job, in fact. Sack the Scouser. Sorry, Graham, looks like you're fired. A couple more super chats and we can get rid of Graham forever. That's not really what we're trying to do here, is it? Okay, so what I want to do is, having depressed you all with the existential crisis that humanity faces, I thought we'd go on and look at the newspapers. And one of the best things about the newspapers today is there's only one story. Well, I'll point out a couple of the newspapers that managed to add another story to it. And there's an interesting take from the Daily Mail, which I'm sure won't surprise anybody.
On global.
Let's just get rid of Farage's voice. But let's switch to the newspapers and have a look at the headlines. So there's the Metro, and it deals with a little sport called football, I believe. And what an amazing day yesterday. I hope all of you watched yesterday's coverage of the Euro final. I imagine all of you were in the same kind of stress as me watching that. But what an amazing set of women. An incredible, from the manager to the captain to every single player in that team, are impressive human beings. Not just physically, not just because of their athletic skills, but because of their team spirit and their humility and just, Lucy Bronze, who's my favourite player, played through the entire tournament, the entire 3-week tournament, with a fractured tibia. It's just unbelievable that the woman was playing with a broken leg. It makes me so proud to be English. And it's such an amazing story that these women managed to get through, where the men have failed dismally. Now, I'm going to scoot through a number of the papers because they all kind of lead with the same sort of story. So the Eye says, Queens of Europe, England are champions again in incredible show of defiance. And there's Chloe Kelly there kissing the trophy. Chloe Kelly brought on a lot earlier than previously in the tournament, and again saves England from a defeat, both during the game with an amazing input into the game, and during the penalties in particular, along with Hannah. There is Hannah, and that's a lovely picture, I think. The Guardian go with the Queens of Europe again. Of course, we have to make these people part of the monarchy in these circumstances, but I don't know why. Why can't they just be champions of Europe? Why can't they just be the best athletes in this particular sport in Europe? I don't know. They have to be crowned as queens, and I'm not sure that is the appropriate way to look at it. The Sun goes with the hand of God. Goalie is the hero in thrilling penalty shootout. Well, I think her and Chloe Kelly deserve the plaudits for that. But yeah, Hannah did an amazing job yesterday and throughout this entire tournament, particularly taking over from Mary Earps, who was a national hero and pulled out just before the tournament, and a lot of doubt expressed about whether Hannah could live up to it, and I think she made this tournament hers. The Daily Star, Lionesses Euros 2025 souvenir pullout. Ecstasy for the Lionesses as they win Euros on pens. There's a bit of sub-editing there, penalties obviously. It's home again, and not crowning the Lionesses as queens in this case. The Daily Express, Lionesses roar to victory. And England bring Euro 2025 home. Every single newspaper, pretty much every newspaper, is covering this story. And as we should, because if it was the men's game, we'd all have a week off, I imagine. But the men are useless. They can't win tournaments like this. And they are completely embarrassed, or they should be, by this amazing team of women. Champions again, and history made in a penalty drama. Daily Mail, I just think this sums up some of the problems that right-wing politics has here. But so Golden Girl Chloe fires Lionesses to Euro's glory. Next, a trip to the palace. And there's a lovely picture there of Chloe and Michelle Agimang. They don't really mention Michelle. I don't know why. But Michelle was actually voted Young Player of the Tournament, which is incredible. A 19-year-old ex-ball boy. She was a ball boy at the last Euros. And at the age of 19, saved the England team a number of times. And she's pictured there, but Chloe gets all the glory from that picture. And then they can't help themselves by saying, now shut migrant protest hotel. As demonstrators clash again in Epping, Tories demand that Labour listen to local concerns and move asylum seekers. Now, if you ask me, this is fucking typical of the Daily Mail and right-wing politics, that you've got something to be incredibly proud of in this country and something to be incredibly ashamed of in this country. And the Daily Mail decides to put them equally on their front page. What a bunch of arseholes they are. The Times leads with a picture there of the amazing Lionesses. And also a story that Starmer is to press Trump on Gaza. I'm not entirely convinced that that's going to be a successful trick unless Starmer can find some way to convince Trump that his golf course is under threat by the people of Israel. The Daily Telegraph leads with Chloe Kelly there, England's roar of victory, and Trump. Actually, the only newspaper to lead on the story that I'm leading on today, Trump, wind power is a con job. That man is a freaking idiot, but he's a useful idiot for the oil industry. And I think the Telegraph backing that up there. The Financial Times doesn't have the Lionesses on the front cover. It does have the news conference that I covered at the beginning of this, and Brussels' trade deal that was done last night, which was the reason they were meeting in Scotland, and they've managed to negotiate their tariffs down. Trump was rattling on about the fact that his deals basically involved him just doing tariffs and doing deals on tariffs. But Europe managed yesterday to convince Trump that they should reduce tariffs on their tariffs should be reduced as well. So look, what a great day yesterday was. I can't stress enough how much joy the Lionesses have brought to me. I'm not a football fan. I don't really follow the men's game. My kids do in particular, and I know many of you do as well. But the men's game for me doesn't really interest me at all, and I think most of the culture associated with men's football I find not something attractive to myself. But the women's game has inspired me for the last 4 or 5 years, and I admit to jumping on the success bandwagon after they won the Euros and being in the finals of the World Cup. But I followed the local team Brighton, which Michelle plays for, amongst others, and we've hosted games down here as well. The teams have been very involved in my city, and I just love the environment that they play in. I love the fact that the stadiums sound predominantly female. I love the fact that we're good at it. Listen, yesterday I was half and half. I have a Spanglish grandson, many of you might know, and for me, either outcome would have been fine from his point of view. But I can't help being a bit jingoistic about yesterday's game and incredibly proud of those women. I have to say that increasingly, whether it's an age issue or the illnesses that I've recently been dealing with. I am very easy to turn to tears, and watching a lot of the coverage yesterday and a lot of the clips that I watched online yesterday, I find myself welling up watching the interviews. Chloe Kelly in particular, I think, I don't know what her politics are. Wouldn't it be awful if it turns out that she comes home and goes on a protest in Epping? But she's incredibly proud to be English, but demonstrates the kind of humility, teamwork and team spirit, as well as a love for her fellow players around the world that Farage could do with learning a few lessons from. Tim Ballum, thank you so much for the £5. They already dump the homeless and drug addicts out of the southeast to other parts of the UK. Have I missed something contextually there, basically? But yeah, being honest with you, in terms of homeless, one of the problems we have in Brighton, particularly, and Eastbourne and Hastings around me on the south coast, is that actually we do get a lot of people coming down here, and primarily from London. So we have our fair share, and we're not trying to move them. We are trying to help them as much as we can, basically. But I do think there's a disparity involved in that. Let's just go back in and look at some of the comments in the chat, shall we? Liz Allen, Vendetta. Poisoning pigeons in the park was a satire on something done in Boston in the 1950s, which was sad. This is much like his I Want to Go Back to Dixie song or the Vatican Rag. I'm guessing this is about, is it Tim Leher, who died last night, and famous for doing the periodic table song to the tune of a operetta, and I'm sure taught most of us at least the first 5 elements on the elemental table. But sad that a satirical songwriter has passed away, although I am told that he gave up music, I think sometimes in the 70s, and went back to his life of academia. Captain Coconut says, yesterday was a good day as scientists have finally found out why Betelgeuse is dimming occasionally. It has a partner star very close to it. Yeah, that's true, Captain Coconut. I was watching something about that myself yesterday. It's interesting that they think that Betelgeuse has a partner star that is orbiting it, a much dimmer star that is orbiting it something like every 5 years. And we get a chance every 2.5 years to work out whether it's there or not. And they've got evidence that there may well be another star going around it. Betelgeuse is one of the nearest stars to us, and it does keep going dimmer and brighter. And there's a lot of evidence that in the next tens of thousands of years, I believe, but quite likely that it might be very soon, Betelgeuse may well go supernova, which would be an incredible sight in the sky for us because it's so close to us. It would be brighter than the moon when it happens and would last for a long time. But part of the reason that people have thought it was going to go supernova soon is that it did keep brightening and dimming, which is a sign that a star might be doing that. And it turns out that it might have a partner. I will probably do a show, if I get a chance, about developments in our exploration of the universe, because, God, it's a lot more interesting than the pontifications of Trump and Farage. Wouldn't it be interesting to find out, to ask Trump and Farage what they know about Betelgeuse, what they know about partner stars, what they know about gravity wells, what they know about black holes, what they know about quantum physics. I imagine Trump would come up with some bullshit about the fact that quantum scientists have worked out why shower heads are not providing pressure or something ridiculous. But yeah, it's what have we got here? Sorry, in the chat. Please don't use that joke pronunciation, Betelgeuse. Douglas Adams has a lot to answer for. Yeah, Betelgeuse or whatever the pronunciation is. Kate Smith says that you know that Trump wears a catheter and a nappy. Who's changing those bad boys, Ellie Chaos? Yeah, it's an interesting debate, isn't it? I don't know. Would that bring down Trump if anyone found out that? It would be grossly unfair. I know some people who are currently dealing with issues like that in their life, and it's not a nice thing. But Trump claims to be a superhero and draws himself that way in his memes, but blatantly is a failing human being in his own right. Captain Coconut says that Trump on Betelgeuse would say, "What flavour is that juice?" Yes, he probably would. And Chris C, there is close to 1 million houses empty across the UK. Why can't the government just use compulsory purchase powers, buy them all up and refurbish them and rent them at social rates? It's a really good point. Maybe a subject for another video, but also, something that the Labour Party is trying to do something about. And I think this is one of the issues, if we go back to the climate change and migration issue, is that quietly the Labour Party are actually trying to do something about this in government. Now, they might not be doing enough, and they might be causing problems in welfare and other areas that are rage baiting the right-wing press. But they are actually, Ed Miliband is doing some work on sustainability in this country, on creating an energy infrastructure that doesn't rely on oil or gas, whether it's ours or Russian or Saudi Arabian oil and gas. And that's being derided by the MSM to a huge extent because oil money. And Miliband is finding it hard to get that story through. But, we are making progress towards that in the UK. It's not about whether putting up some windmills will reduce the impact of climate change. It's not really about that. It's about our ability to manage our own energy, to democratize energy, to bring the cost of investment in that kind of equipment down, to look at the recycling issues. Trump's an idiot for thinking you would just bury those windmills. That's not what happens. The man's a fucking fool. But we're doing something about that. We are looking at doing something about making empty properties go into council control much quicker. And that's a slow process, but it's part of Angela Rayner's remit, and she's working on that. Now, we all know Labour's comms division is crap, although at the weekend I noticed that they appointed an ex-editor of The Sun to head up their comms. That's something that worked well for the Tories, isn't it? So no chance of him being arrested, I hope. So maybe Labour's comms is going to start to improve. Certainly they need somebody that can spot how to spin a story so that the rest of the press pick it up. They seem to be failing at that dismally each time. I think one other thing that before we depart that I think the Labour Party should do something about on the back of this weekend's great news from the Lionesses is really start to do something about investing in women's sport and girls' sport. I think there's an imperative now on the government that girls should be able to choose soccer, football as their primary sport through school, that they should get equal support for that, and they should get equal resources to support that. If we've got a successful team, we should encourage that more and more. That game has improved so dramatically over the last 8 to 9 years, and that's because of the inspiration of that team. And government should absolutely now get behind anything that the England team come up with as a way to make that better. And I think, it was the largest audience in Switzerland, largest physical audience in stands for any women's Euros, and 625,000 people, I think, attended matches, full stadiums for almost every game. I don't know the viewing figures yet, but, it's become an incredibly enjoyable sport. And I did a couple of posts about it yesterday on social media, and there were some, I would argue these days, brave men, it's always men, who decided to tell me that it wasn't an equivalent sport to the men's soccer ball game. And I kind of agreed with them because it's got much less racism, although racism is there. It's got much less misogyny and homophobia involved in that sport. It's more accessible to women and families. And to be honest with you, despite all of those girls looking amazing on the pitch yesterday, I think most of the men spend far more time working on their hairstyles than they do their morals. and their team spirit. I'm a big supporter of the idea that we should have one manager for the England team, and it's the one that keeps winning tournaments, and she should manage both the men's and the women's game in this country. We should also make sure she doesn't get poached, because she has a habit now of winning that tournament for a number of different teams. Let's hope she's still in there to get us a World Cup victory that the men couldn't do. I think it's in Brazil, isn't it? So let's do that. Stevie H, lazy stereotypes. I'm out by all. Well, I don't entirely know which stereotypes I've created there, but I apologise if it was me. Tim Ballon, rugby for girls too. Yeah, absolutely. The Rugby World Cup starts, I think, this weekend, with the Roses playing this weekend, and let's hope that we can do the same for rugby as we've done for football. Sonic Shadow 191 says, I'd say there's much less theatrics and diving, though I've noticed it coming up more and more. Yeah, maybe as the game progresses, they'll start to pick up on some of the professional fouls and the tricks and games that many of the professional men play in the game. Let's hope not. Let's really hope not. One of the problems I think in the women's game that they're trying to avoid is what happened in the men's game when money became a huge factor in the game, and increasingly that's happening in the women's game as well. Excuse me. Balancing the implications of that vast amount of money coming into a sport and the requirements of that money, the sponsors, etc., is going to be interesting. Scott's left to do something this morning, but yeah, I heard that. Martin, cheers, bud. I don't know what's going on in the chat. Why have I upset Stevie H? Does anyone know? Or is it somebody else in the chat that's upset him? I hope it's not them. Right, well, we are coming up to 10 o'clock. I have successfully played out some videos with audio and managed to launch this podcast with my microphone working. So, my day started well. I hope that you think that there might be something in this idea that the oil companies are funding right-wing politicians and nationalists because it's protecting their profits and enabling them and those right-wing politicians to avoid the implications of our reliance on oil. And it's something that I intend to explore a bit more, probably through cartoons. But thank you very much for everyone that gave us a super chat. I really hope I didn't miss anybody as I went through that. Thank you very much for those of you that have contributed to the chat. It's always lovely to see you in here. And thank you for some of the kind comments about my temporary holding of this seat for Graham. Graham will be back towards the end of the week, and I'm very much looking forward to that because I can stay in my pajamas for longer in the morning. I did contemplate doing this in my pajamas this morning, but maybe we'll save that for an opportunity when people pay a little bit more. We could turn it into an OnlyFans site, Mike's pajamas site. Thank you, Sfax. Thank you, Fatumshuk. I can't say that basically, and Captain Coconut. I've enjoyed this hour. I'm glad that some of you have as well. And we will see you tomorrow morning for Anne Phillips, right at the last minute, a £2 contribution, very quick contribution and very much appreciated. Thank you very much for that. It keeps this channel going, and we've got some plans, Graham and I, and various other members of Politics Social, to start hopefully expanding some of the content that we do. And I really appreciate the fact that many of you enjoyed me waffling on this, because mark this space, I might do this a bit more. Darren Christian, if this keeps going, we'll go on till 11 o'clock, but that's fine as long as it's super chats keeping me on air. Darren Christian, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. Best way to destroy a sport is to get money people involved. Doing a great job, Mike. Yep, I think that's probably the problem. If the money people get too involved, then let's hope that the women's sport has built itself in such a way that it manages to avoid the pitfalls of that. Purple Pros, thank you for sparing us your Thomas the Tank Engine pajamas. How did you know? How did you know? Okay, that's Diz, thank you very much for your moderation in the chat today. Right, I am going to go. Look after yourselves today. Have a lovely day. Looks like the weather's going to be good, and let's enjoy the next couple of days of celebrating the Lionesses, and try and ignore the arseholes that are Trump, Farage, and all of the oil companies. Good luck, enjoy, and I will see you tomorrow.